It's Ashley with SurrogateFirst, and I am so excited to have one of our mental health professionals, Samantha Lavy, be part of our call today. I'd love to be able to introduce you to her. We've been working with her for a few years now, and she's here to help us with supporting and doing psychological evaluations on our surrogates. Also, as support for questions, we kind of go to you for all kinds of things. Sorry, my camera's a little wonky. So I would love to kind of just introduce you. Maybe you could share a little bit about you and your practice, if that was possible.
Sure. So hi, my name is Samantha Lavy, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in third-party reproduction. And of course, third-party reproduction is when there's an egg donor or a surrogate or both being used. And so I work with different surrogacy agencies, and I work with IVF clinics to assess the parties involved or who are working in the arrangement. And I also provide support to surrogates, egg donors, intended parents, and also the agency team as well. My practice is located in Stamford, Connecticut. I've been working in this field since 1999. And so I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different patients from all over the world and helping to create families.
Awesome. I really appreciate you. I know we've worked closely. And so I'm so excited that you're here. A little bit about me, guys. If you come in, it's usually me or Yesenia. No, we gave Yesenia the night off, so she's with her family. But I am Ashley. I'm the director over at SurrogateFirst and a 4-time surrogate. I'm also in the field. I work with Seeds Ethics, Resolve, Reproductive Alliance. Also a surrogacy coach for a global medical company. And so I definitely love the surrogacy field. I love educating. And these webinars are for everyone. So you don't have to be a surrogate or an intended parent with SurrogateFirst. For us to be able to help you, if you have questions, you can always email me at ashley@surrogatefirst.com. But we are here for the community. So we try to bring these webinars every 2 weeks to bring up different topics. We talk about the process, the timelines. And today we will be talking about the psychological aspect of it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the evaluations. I know a lot of surrogates get nervous when they think they have to do this psychological evaluation and they think they have to be perfect, but we're really just looking for healthy humans. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. We also want to talk about the relationship between the GC and the IP, which would be the surrogate and the intended parents. It is kind of I always likened it to like an awkward married at first sight. You know, we get to meet each other and quickly we're trying to grow a human. And so there can be a lot of emotions in that. Surrogates are coming in with their own past and history, and intended parents are coming in with theirs. And so sometimes those can kind of collide. And so I'd love to kind of learn a little bit more about, you know, healthy boundaries and what that looks like to build that relationship, or who to go to if they start to struggle. We want to talk about motivations, both parties' motivations for going into surrogacy and what that looks like. And then we will finally just kind of finalize it with our webinar on the support systems. Surprisingly, we always think about the surrogate having to have a strong support system as she goes through this process, but I'm sure that intended parents, it's just as important for them to have a good support system. So I'm excited to kind of cover those 4, I would say basic topics, but they're not basic. We could probably do a webinar on each one. So we'll kind of just touch on them. And if you guys are watching this and you want more and you want to go into more depth about different topics that we have here, or even if you have your own questions that you would love to see us cover, you know, reach out to us, comment, like, subscribe on our YouTube or our Facebook. Let us know and we will listen to you. That's where we create all of these videos, is from your questions or your concerns or things that we see in the field of surrogacy. A couple things about us at SurrogateFirst. I won't make this long because you guys see me every 2 weeks. Basically, things that are important with SurrogateFirst: we are a no match, no fee guarantee agency. And so we never put our parents into any kind of predicament of like holding your monies hostage. You will need to approve a surrogate's profile. She'll approve your profile. We will have the clinics review records, complete a very in-depth match meeting. And then at that point, we consider that a match. So just know, being able to work with us, there is no risk. Same thing on the surrogates. We go through the screening process. We do not charge you for anything on that end. We do have a health and wellness program, support programs. And so we definitely want to make sure that we are treating everyone as a human being. Our biggest thing is to choose people over profits. And so we do have a very extensive staff that is there to kind of answer your questions, be your support. Definitely reach out and we will be here to help you. And I know you shared a little bit about your clinic, but are you open to helping independent journeys with the psychological evaluations? What kind of services can you provide to surrogates, egg donors, and intended parents throughout this process?
Sure. So I can absolutely provide, I do provide support to surrogates who may be struggling through the journey itself, or the intended parents, or sometimes even the group. So meeting with the intended parents and the surrogate, if something comes up and the communication breaks down and we need to talk about that. During COVID and the COVID vaccine, we had a lot of those meetings we were doing. And so I think it's always good to have a third person kind of come in, get pulled in, and just create a safe space so that everyone can talk through the issues that may come up through the journey, because it is a long journey.
I really appreciate that. I think it is so important. I love seeing someone on a regular basis throughout the process. And then once I delivered, being able to kind of just decompress, go through the entire process. Even though I had some amazing journeys, it's still good for me to meet with someone, kind of bounce off ideas, get myself back into my normal life after surrogacy. And so I definitely think it's important. There is no shame in having any type of mental health struggles throughout the process. We are dealing with a lot of IVF medications. So there can be hormonal changes with that, and pregnancy, and then being the postpartum period, can be difficult too. So we appreciate that people can reach out to you. What would be the best way for them to reach out to you if they did want to learn more about your services?
Sure. The best way is probably to email me at samantha@jsrcgroup.com. There's also a phone number. I don't have it memorized.
No, no, I have it.
Yeah, it's so I think email is probably the best way to reach me.
Yeah, of course. And at the end, I do have a slide that we can kind of go over to be able to talk about your contact information. So email is always the best for all of us. I'm sure you're in a lot of sessions or you're busy writing reports. And so probably email is the best way to get a hold of you, and probably the most, the quickest turnaround, I would say.
Yes, you're right. Or so even Instagram, my Instagram account too.
Nice. Look at you. I'm still struggling with the Instagram, so I definitely understand that one. Now, I did want to talk about our first subject that we were going to talk about is the psychological evaluations. I know parents usually meet with a mental health professional, and then the surrogates do too. Could you touch on just a little bit about like what's that look like for both parties?
Sure. So the evaluation of the surrogate is exactly that. It's an evaluation, and it's the standard practice of care. It's recommended by the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, and it consists of a clinical interview or meeting with the candidate and her partner, if she has one. We also administer a psychological test that is reviewed by the mental health person, and of course it goes with the findings of the interview, and it goes as a recommendation to the agency. So the components of the meeting, I'll be brief because we can talk about this for days. But I always start off by telling our surrogate candidates that it's a very easy and casual meeting. It's nothing to be scared or anxious about as long as you're honest. We're really, like you said, Ashley, we're really just assessing their readiness. We want to make sure they've been educated. We want to make sure that they can commit to this process. We want to make sure that they understand what some of the failures may look like. We talk about their history. We go through their family medical history, not their medical history, I'm sorry, their family background, where they grew up. We talk about their medical history, their pregnancies. We make sure that there is really no unresolved traumas in their past, unresolved pregnancy or labor and delivery traumas. We talk through the relationships that they have in their life, which is really important. We want to make sure that they have support. Of course, we do talk about if they've had any legal history, alcohol and drug use, nicotine use, past or present. We spend a lot of time talking about their mental health history, including postpartum, period. If they've had postpartum depression, we talk about that. Were they treated? How were they treated? And we talk about their children. We talk about, becoming parents. What was that like? How did they conceive? Was it easy? Do they have difficulty? We do spend a lot of time also talking about their intentions and their motivation for doing this. That's something that we spend a lot of time on. When we get through all of that, we get to the part where we get to talk about the fun stuff, which is the journey. And so what are their expectations for intended parent matching? Do they have any preferences? Maybe they don't necessarily have preferences, but they do have an idea in their mind when they come into this of what it'll be like.
Yes.
Is it realistic? Sometimes it's not. And so we have to kind of help them understand. If they've already been introduced to intended parents, we talk about that. And we talk about what was their impression? How did they feel after the meeting? Was it their first intended parent couple? Did they meet a few? How did they make a choice? We talk about what is their expectation of the relationship with their intended parents. And oftentimes, as you know, surrogates don't really know. Or if they're a first-time surrogate, they don't really know what to expect. And so they'll often say, whatever the intended parent wants is okay with me, and I'll adjust to what they want. But we really want to know what they want.
Yes.
We want them to come out of this we want them to leave the program whole and unharmed. And so that's really our job, is to make sure that they are making a good decision. It's good for their family, their partner. He or she has to be on board. And we want to make sure that their kids are also going to be okay and unharmed by all this.
No, I think it's amazing. And, not every agency, goes into education, and not every surrogate does a ton of research. And so you are that safety guard of like, hey, let's just make sure, let's slow down. Let's make sure we've thought about the good, the bad, what can happen, the highs, the lows, so that they are educated and they can make that educated consent to be a surrogate. So, I mean, your time with them is so valuable. On the parent side, obviously, we are never assessing whether or not they are sane enough to be a parent, because we don't do that for anyone else. But what do you guys do? You do the same thing about talking about the process and those kind of items?
Yeah. So the intended parent meeting is really an education meeting. And so we're assessing their readiness also. We're assessing, if they're prepared and able to have a relationship with a third person. Have they, if they have infertility struggle, if they've had infertility struggles, have they more or less resolved those struggles, and are they ready to move on to surrogacy? What does it mean for them to use a surrogate? If it's a single parent, it's a different conversation than it is if it's a couple. Similarly, we talk about expectations of the journey and expectations of their surrogate communication styles. Do they think they'll be able to give up control? What are some of the boundaries that they want put in place for themselves, and what boundaries will they respect with their surrogate? That's really important. Do they have any accommodations that are really important for their surrogate to follow, dietary or otherwise? We often have, and Ashley, you can speak more to this, but we often have intended parents from all over the world who come to us to do surrogacy. And so we have to be very respectful of everyone's beliefs and cultures and religions. And so we do that. Yeah. And then, of course, we talk a lot about things like multiple births, termination. We talk about the day of the birth and what will that be like? What do the intended parents want? What does the surrogate want? Afterwards, we talk about if the intended parents want to have a relationship with their surrogate after, and then of course, do they plan on talking to their child in the future, and what do they plan on telling them?
I love that. And I would say that, there are some states that it's required law to do a parent education consult. There are clinics that do require it. It doesn't all the time happen. I would say that this is a conversation and a meeting that I would recommend intended parents do even before they start the surrogacy process, just going through like the creating of their embryos, or maybe they have embryos, but when they decide they're going to go through surrogacy, this would be so valuable to be able to understand that. If parents, more parents came to our agency understanding, here's our boundaries, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're comfortable with, it helps us to find the right match too even quicker. So I think that, being able to meet with you is such a vital role that it should be mandatory for all families to be able to meet with someone and discuss these topics and kind of process it. I know for myself, I dealt with secondary infertility, and had I had to go through surrogacy, there would be some warning and there would be some, understanding of what does that look like for me as a woman who wanted to carry my children, and those struggles that we had after we had our first two. And so I definitely think that that is so valuable. And you brought up a couple things, like during this process, you're talking to them about what does that relationship look like with the surrogate, or what does that relationship look like with the intended parents, and the ups and downs of what that can be. And I think also, what boundaries are everyone comfortable with? What does that look like, and what you're sharing, and the relationship you're wanting to grow before, during, and even after the pregnancy. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that relationship between the GC and the IP?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And I always think it's interesting when we have a surrogate who's already had a journey where they're going into a second journey or a third journey, because it's interesting to know what really worked well for them, and then going into another journey, what they would like, what worked well as far as communication, texting, telephone calls once a week. How much were they able to share? How much did the intended parent want? Were they satisfied? Did they get enough time with their intended parent? Sometimes intended parents are busy, and sometimes they don't necessarily have the time to talk every day. Sometimes surrogates don't necessarily have the time to talk every single day. So that's where the matching also comes in. And so I think that the matching is really, really important. And you guys are very good at it, making sure that we don't just have healthy surrogates and healthy intended parents, but we actually spend the time making sure that the personalities are also very similar. And so the relationship, we know any relationship in life is important, but this particular relationship, of course, is built on trust. And so, like you said, the beginning of our session, that you're carrying a baby for someone who you don't know, and it happens very quickly. You meet, and then, probably 3 months later, you're pregnant, and then here you are. Sometimes you're really far apart. Sometimes you're in different time zones. Sometimes there's different languages, and you can't speak directly to each other, and you need an interpreter. And so I think it's very important also for us, for the team, for the agency, for the mental health people who are working on the journey, to make sure that everybody has, their expectations are talked about in the very beginning. And so we don't want anyone to feel during the journey like they're not heard, or that they're not being trusted. I think that's where resentment comes in, and that's where problems arise.
I appreciate that. Do you have anything off the top of your head that you suggest, like what is like your biggest tip, for an intended parent or a surrogate going into this?
Yeah, my biggest tip is just to be as completely honest as you possibly can. Surrogates want their intended parents to be completely honest up front. If you don't want a relationship after, just tell them up front. Don't tell them, don't make promises necessarily that you're not even sure if you're going to be able to keep. And then, of course, intended parents want their surrogate to be as honest as possible. If you're not feeling well, tell them. If you're bleeding, tell them. If you fall, tell them. I think sometimes surrogates always, feel like they want to protect their intended parent, and they don't want to hurt them, or they don't want them to worry, or they don't want them to be scared. So they sometimes hold on to information until they absolutely have to tell them. And then that's where we see problems come in. So I think being as honest as you possibly can and being comfortable with that is very important.
I definitely agree with you. When I had my first two journeys, it was with the same family. And we had a great relationship. I'm not an everyday talker, and I actually picked international parents because I loved pregnancy. I was great with pregnancy. I wanted to have a relationship. I wanted us to become friends, and hopefully, eventually become family if that was a thing. But I just didn't know how I would be able to do with like domestic intended parents and more frequent conversations. And so I picked an international family. Once I completed that second journey, I was matched with another family, and it was very important to me that we communicated that, what the delivery looked like, what communication after looked like for me. And they were, all for it, because when you're going into a match meeting, you're very excited. And I'm sure that they didn't want to say anything that would cause me to be like, I don't want to match. And I'm sure I didn't say, things, or maybe I held back. It was a little easier being a third time surrogate to be more sure of myself and forthcoming. But that wasn't what we had. And so I had to believe that their motivation was to have that. But like in the real world, not everyone clicks, not everyone invites each other over for barbecues, but it was a struggle trying to like build that relationship and communicate when maybe they weren't capable of communicating on a regular basis, or, and so I definitely appreciate and it felt like maybe even if we would have had like a group session with the mental health professional to really understand, or even for them to dive deeper into what are we really comfortable with, and do we even like text and communicate with our friends on a regular basis,
Right.
So I think it's definitely helpful to be able to have those times of single individual meetings and then coming together to be able to, it almost like a second match meeting, right, with a mental health professional. So I definitely think that that could be valuable in that building of the relationship and causing a smoother journey.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, everyone has different reasons, right? Every intended parent has a different reason for coming into surrogacy, and so do surrogates. We're often telling surrogates all the time, this is not a get rich scheme. Like, it's not get rich quick. It's not even get rich, right? Like, when we break down the 2 years we're going through this process, it's a couple dollars an hour. And
Right.
it's not worth it, when you have failed transfers, or you're shooting yourself in the hip for months of medications that are causing lumps and bruises. You really do have to help a family, but there are several factors and aspects of motivations on both sides. Maybe you can kind of share what you see in that, and even maybe dispel some, I know in our conversations in the past, dispel some things like, well, hey, that might be part of the motivations, but that's okay. So maybe you could share a little bit more about that side of things of motivations.
Sure. So we often hear surrogate applicants say they love being mothers. They just love being a parent, and they want to be able to give that to someone else. And I think that's probably what we mostly hear from applicants. Of course, there is compensation. And so a lot of times we will really talk about what does that mean to them? How do they plan to use the money? And I often hear that they want to buy a house. They're living in an apartment, and they really want a down payment, and they want to be able to give their family a home, which is fine. And I tell them that's perfectly okay. We make sure that they do have altruistic reasons for doing it as well. And I think that being compensated and having a plan for the compensation is perfectly fine. When surrogates say, I'm not doing it for the money, or I don't really have a plan for the money, I think that's fine too. Those are fewer, applicants. We don't see a lot of applicants who say that. We mostly see applicants who have a plan, and that's fine. We want to make sure that they've made a decision that's good for them and for their family. Other motivations, we often see nurses, we see teachers, we see people, women who are helpers. They often say, I like to help people. I've thought about this for a very long time. We really prefer that they have completed their family. We don't require it, right? But we do prefer. And so anything can happen in a pregnancy, and we want to make sure that they know that if they're not finished building their family, that they may not be able to have another child. And so that is the reason why we take women who have children. But other motivations are family members who struggled with infertility, very good friends, best friend, struggle through infertility, and they watched firsthand and they really just want to help someone. We really like when we have surrogates refer surrogates. And so we love that. And so we see women who have a very close friend, sister, family member who has been a surrogate. They experienced it firsthand. They met the intended parents and kind of watched the whole journey. And this motivated them to want to do it as well.
No, definitely. I mean, I loved being pregnant, and when I dealt with the secondary infertility, I realized how I had become very bitter for a couple of years, not understanding, why we could have two children and then, we would end up having, male factor infertility. But then I quickly realized, who was I to complain? I had two children, three total. I have my bonus daughter, who's my oldest. And why wasn't I helping anyone else? I always joke around like, well, God gave me big hips and easy childbirth. I might as well help someone. And so, we went through it, but the money was very beneficial to our family. We had goals, and I try to tell people that, the first journey, I was very embarrassed about the comp. I didn't want that to be an aspect. That wasn't why I was doing it. And, and I was ashamed that I even got compensated. So I struggled with that until the end when my intended mother said, but we're equal. I was blessed financially to be able to afford surrogacy, and you were blessed to be able to carry my baby, and together we need each other in this life. And that's when I realized, like, there's no shame in this. Like, I love my family. It doesn't change anything that they compensated me for my time and efforts and pain and suffering. And and so I think that's where I was more comfortable with myself on the second one. Like, yeah, yes, I was compensated. It's a lot of hard work to go through surrogacy, and pregnancy. And so, I definitely understand that aspect. And in the end, we had a goal. And I was blessed with an additional family now. I'm an aunt to three amazing little kiddos. And my family was able to, financially reach our goals too in life. And so, yeah, I definitely understand those motivations. And I think there's probably motivations on the intended parent side. Some parents, obviously, they want to be parents, but there's also things of like maybe being the only child. And this is the last child in the legacy that they could potentially carry on their name. And they're going to love that child. It doesn't change that fact. But, there's that side of it. Our parents are getting older and they've been trying IVF for a long time. And so this is one way to be able to make their parents grandparents before the end of their life. And so I think we all have different motivations, but at the core, we all just want to bring this little baby as safely as possible to the parents. And I get to go home and sleep, and they've got 25 plus years of raising that child.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like I have the easier side of the surrogacy. I'm like, I only have 2 years. You guys have got 20 something years to be with this, with this process and the results of a surrogacy. On that side, though, is your support system. Do you feel it's important for both parties to have a strong support system? What does that look like?
Absolutely. And of course, it's different for everyone. And so, with surrogates, if they're partnered, that's usually their primary support person, best friend, siblings, co-workers, colleagues, neighbors, their parents. It's really important. And we do spend a lot of time talking about that because sometimes, they're going to need help with childcare. They're going to most likely fly to wherever the embryos are, to the IVF clinic. They need someone to be able to babysit. They may go into labor in the middle of the night. They may be on bed rest. And it's hard. It's in pregnancy is not easy. And so just having someone they can go to. I always ask surrogates, tell me who you texted or who you spoke to in the last few days. Who are your go-to people? And I kind of make them say my number one, my number two, my number three. And we make sure that they have at least 3 people that they can go to for support. They have their team at SurrogateFirst. And so surrogates often tell me that they like that SurrogateFirst. They really think that, and compared to other agencies, they really do feel like SurrogateFirst pays a lot of attention to the surrogates. And that's very, very important, as well as the intended parents. And so the intended parents, of course, need their support to get through it. And of course, again, it's their partner if they have one. If it's a single parent, sometimes it's their parents or a parent, mom or dad. And of course, colleagues, friends, neighbors, people with children. The intended parent, I find that they will usually lean on friends that have children to kind of give them advice, kind of help them through the process. Sometimes they have friends that have been intended parents, and so they can help them get through the journey, help them make decisions, because there's a lot of decisions. And sometimes the intended parents will say, I have decision fatigue. There are a lot of decisions to make in the beginning. And sometimes, especially like with gay men or single men, they don't really know. They've never really talked at all about these issues. And so we try to help them through, and so that they don't get decision fatigue.
I think that's great. I think it's really important. We see a lot of parents and surrogates, build friendships too with people who have been through the process, and so I definitely think that a strong support system, while I'm more of an extroverted, introvert, like I like being at home. I don't text my best friends on a weekly basis, it was important to have those friends. For me, it was super important to have the support system of my agency and other surrogates at the end during postpartum, because people were wanting to meet me with mourning because I had just given away a baby, because on the outside world, they don't understand quite what it looks like. And I was trying to explain to them, like, I'm not emotional about a baby. I think I cried more when my intended mother left because I loved the time we had with each other. But I'm crying. One, I'm full of hormones. So, emotions are fleeting. And so for me, that's not, an emotion is not a reason to act, and so I know that these are not, they're real, but they're not like a sadness. It's just, I'm being pumped full of hormones, just like, animals in the wild are, so that you don't injure your young when you're lack of sleep. And so, there's that side of it, but also for them to be able to help me, because I think truly, if you've been a surrogate, you do understand that there's a mourning period. Like, that is a season in my life that I loved and I took so serious for so many years. And with the intended parents at the end and the agency, it's a constant checking in. Like, are you having contractions? Is this baby? And there's a lot of attention, and there's a lot of oohing and ahhing as a surrogate that people do. Oh, you're such an angel. You're so many of these things, right? And so I think sometimes there's a fear of, one, was this relationship I built with the parents genuine? And now that I'm no longer, needed for bringing the baby to Earthside, are we still friends? There's the other side of like, okay, now I'm going back to, I had this life full of purpose. And so for me, it was returning back to that support of the surrogates, my mental health professionals of, okay, let's process this. Like, I'm not just Ashley, the surrogate, there's so many more aspects to me, and getting back into my normal life of having lunch with friends and going back to work and things like that really helped to ease it in. But I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have a strong support system, or didn't have an acceptance and that mental health side of it with someone who is a professional who could say, Ashley, yeah, you're definitely right on this. And hey, let's talk about it. Let's process it, without everyone going, oh, I'm so sorry, your baby left. I'm like, not my baby. I just babysat and I returned that baby back to the parents,
Absolutely.
Well, I definitely appreciate you. I think, like, we had, this was sweet. I mean, I can't believe we went through like 30 minutes. I felt like this was 5 minutes, but this went really quick. Like I said in the beginning, we have a slide, so I wanted to share. If you need to get a hold of Samantha, you can reach her on the email There's also her phone number at the bottom, which is 203-212-8383. I'm assuming email would probably be best, and then text, just because you are probably in sessions and I can't imagine what that voicemail looks like at the end of the day. I'm like, I just picture that you don't sleep, because anytime we've ever needed you for like an emergency session, or you're like, I got this, I can do it. And I'm like, this poor woman, like, I appreciate your work ethic, but I don't know how you're getting any sleep at this time.
I sleep.
Okay. And then for me, guys, Ashley at surrogatefirst.com. Also 424-567-3703. And again, thank you so much, Samantha, for being part of this and just bringing this information and understanding to the community. We have a lot of independent parents and surrogates that watch our webinars. And so this is one way that we can help to secure and keep surrogacy safe, whether it's an independent or with an agency. And again, if you are independent, reach out to me if you ever have a question or need anything. We are not gatekeepers. We're here to keep the entire field safe. We're here to support the entire field. Agencies aren't always right for all parents and surrogates. And so definitely reach out if you have questions. If you are looking for an agency, well, of course, I'm going to offer Surrogate First. So if you are, reach out to us, ask questions. We've created this amazing surrogate library with a lot of helpful, videos on the entire process. And so definitely want to reach out, ask us. We will be back in 2 weeks. We are coming up in the next couple months. We're going to be meeting with Dr. D from San Diego Fertility, learning more about the SPARS program and sperm washing and how it's making it safe for intended parents who may have HIV to become parents, and for surrogates to, safely be able to carry those children. We've got information about building relationships, surrogacy loss. And so just stick around. If you've got any advice, you guys can definitely give that to us and we will put that in. Sam, would you like to share anything before we head out?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much, Ashley, for inviting me to speak tonight. And also thank you to your team, and thank you to your surrogates and your intended parents. I really appreciate working with all of you.
We appreciate working with you, and we thank you so much for being part of this webinar series.
Great. Thank you.